high-speed rail network from Toronto to Quebec City.
For a high-speed rail network between Quebec City and Toronto.
With a high-speed rail network of 1,000 kilometers between Quebec City and Toronto.
What if I told you Canada is finally planning to do something it hasn't dared attempt in over half a century? Build a high-speed rail line that would connect Toronto to Montreal in just 3 hours. A $100 billion gamble that could transform the nation, or collapse under the same forces that have killed every other rail dream before it. The stakes? Nothing less than the future of Canadian travel. But can this country, infamous for endless delays and budget overruns, actually pull it off this time? Canada has flirted with high-speed rail for decades. The idea has always been tantalising. A sleek bullet train racing across Ontario and Quebec, shrinking a 5.5-hour drive into a quick 3-hour journey. Business leaders love it, politicians love to campaign on it, and travellers stuck in traffic on the 401 dream of it. But every time the dream appears within reach, it slips away. Studies pile up, reports are published, billions are promised, and then nothing. For years, Canadians have watched Japan's Shinkansen, France's TGV, and China's lightning-fast networks expand into global marvel, while here the tracks barely improve. Now, the federal government is back with the boldest promise yet, a $100 billion high-speed rail megaproject running from Toronto to Montreal. Not just a train, but a statement. This isn't about shaving a couple of hours off a trip. It's about rewriting the economic map of the country. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, 3 of Canada's most powerful cities suddenly connected like never before. A corridor that houses more than 20 million people, over half of Canada's GDP, and the political muscle to demand better infrastructure. The proposal is ambitious. Trains would travel at speeds of 300 kilometres per hour or more, rivaling Europe's best line. Entire stations would need to be built from scratch. Vast stretches of land would need to be acquired, and construction costs at $100 billion would dwarf even some of Canada's most notorious megaproject, pipeline, stadium, even hydro dam. But here's the problem. Canada has never built anything like this before. The country's track record on big infrastructure is shaky at best. Think of Muskrat Falls, the Phoenix Pay system, or even Toronto's Eglinton Crosstown LRT, delayed, bloated, and billions over budget. The high-speed rail dream demands not just money, but ruthless efficiency in a country famous for bureaucracy. Critics warn this isn't just about engineering, it's about politics. Ontario and Quebec can barely agree on healthcare funding, let alone a shared megaproject. The federal government may want the glory, but the provinces hold key powers over land and transit. Then there's the lobbying. Airlines terrified of losing short-haul flights, oil companies worried about declining car travel, and real estate developers salivating over new stations. And that's the paradox. High-speed rail could revolutionize Canadian travel or collapse under the very forces that make it necessary. Brawling cities, clogged highways, and an economy desperate for efficiency. The dream has been declared dead before, yet here it is again, more expensive, more ambitious, and more urgent than ever. The question now, why is Canada risking everything on this project right now? And what makes this attempt different from every failure that came before? The timing of Canada's high-speed rail push isn't a coincidence. It's politics, pure, raw, high-stakes politics. For decades, Ottawa has been accused of neglecting infrastructure while watching Europe and Asia lap us. Every election cycle, the promise re-emerges. Sleek train, fast travel, a modern Canada, and every cycle it fizzles out. But now, with a federal government desperate to showcase bold nation-building projects, the bullet train is back on the agenda, this time with a staggering $100 billion price tag. Why now? Because the window for transformation is closing. Canada's population is booming. The Toronto to Montreal corridor is already bursting at the seam. Highways jammed, airports clogged, buses overloaded. In the next 20 years, the corridor could grow by another 7 million people. Without drastic action, the region risks grinding to a halt. A bullet train isn't just flashy, it's survival. But make no mistake, this is a gamble. Politicians are betting that Canadians, long conditioned to expect delays, excuses and cancellations, are finally ready to believe again. The government is framing this as a nation-building project, something on the scale of the Canadian Pacific Railway in the 1800s. Back then, the railway tied the country together. Today, they hope high-speed rail will do the same for a 21st century Canada. Yet the numbers don't lie. $100 billion isn't pocket change. That's more than the annual healthcare budget of every province combined. And once a project of this scale begins, there's no easy exit. Billions could be sunk before the first track is even laid. For the politicians behind it, failure isn't just embarrassing, it could be career-ending. And here's where the gamble becomes clear. This isn't just about train, it's about legacy. Governments want to leave their mark. Airports and subways win local votes, but a high-speed rail system, that's a once-in-a-generation monument. Politicians know that even if costs balloon, if the trains are built, they'll be remembered as visionary. But critics see it differently. They call it a vanity project, an electoral stunt dressed up as progress. After all, Canada has a reputation for turning mega projects into disasters. Could this simply be another promise that looks great in a campaign ad, but collapses under real-world pressure? Supporters argue timing is everything. With climate change accelerating, Canada needs to slash emissions. Short-haul flights between Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal are some of the country's worst polluters. High-speed rail could cut them in half. Add to that billions in new jobs, housing developments around stations, and the chance to finally modernise Canada's outdated railways, and suddenly the gamble looks less like madness and more like inevitability. The truth is, the political gamble isn't whether Canada can afford to build high-speed rail, it's whether Canada can afford not to. And that's why the real battle isn't on the track. It's in Parliament, in provincial capitals, and in boardrooms where airlines, oil and auto giants are preparing to fight for survival. Because if high-speed rail takes off, it doesn't just change travel, it changes everything. It's one thing to announce a $100 billion rail megaproject. It's another thing entirely to build it. And here's the brutal truth. Canada has never built anything like this before. High-speed rail isn't just a faster VIA train, it's an entirely different species of engineering. Tracks have to be straighter, flatter, and isolated from cars, pedestrians, and freight. A single curve in the wrong place, and your bullet train becomes a glorified commuter service crawling at half speed. That's why in Japan and France, engineers carve tunnels through mountains, build bridges over valleys, and design track beds so precise they make surgical tools look sloppy. Now picture Canada's landscape. Between Toronto and Montreal lies farmland, rivers, protected forests, sprawling suburbs, and city cores already bursting at the seams. To hit speeds of 300 kilometers per hour, engineers will need to redesign entire corridors of land. That means expropriations, demolitions, and environmental approval, each one a political landmine waiting to explode. And then there's winter, snow, ice, freeze-thaw cycle, conditions Japan's Shinkansen and Europe's TGV barely encounter on this scale. Canada's rail engineers will need to build a system tough enough to handle brutal blizzards while maintaining millimetre-level precision at 300 kilometres per hour. A single snowdrift could paralyse the system unless billions more are poured into climate proofing. Critics argue this is where Canada's dream meets reality. Just look at Toronto's Eglinton Crosstown, a single urban light rail line that's more than a decade late, billions over budget, and still unfinished. If we can't dig a few kilometres of tunnel in one city, how can we possibly lay down 800 kilometres of bullet train track across 2 provinces? The truth is, Canada doesn't even have the domestic expertise. We'll need to import technology, trains, and engineering know-how from abroad. Japanese firms, French contractors, maybe even Chinese state-backed rail giants. That means billion-dollar deals, political controversy over foreign involvement, and the ever-present risk of disputes blowing timelines apart. Then there's the cost creep. High-speed rail projects worldwide are notorious for budget overrun. California's still unfinished bullet train was supposed to cost $33 billion. Today, more than $100 billion and counting. Spain, Italy, even Britain's HS2 have all seen costs spiral out of control. If Canada follows the same path, that $100 billion price tag could easily balloon to $150 or $200 billion. And yet, supporters argue Canada's challenges are exactly why this project matters. Building through farmland and suburbs is difficult, but it also opens the door for new housing, new cities, and entire economic zones around stations. Harsh winters make engineering brutal, but cracking those challenges could position Canada as a global leader in cold weather rail technology. Still, one question looms over everything. Can Canada build this fast enough? Because unlike stadiums or bridges, a half-finished bullet train is useless. Either the line is completed and operational, or the entire project collapses under its own weight. And that brings us to the most dangerous part of the plan, the timeline. Because while politicians talk about ribbon cuttings in the 2030, history suggests Canadians may be waiting until 2050 or longer before the first train leaves the station. Every mega project creates winners and losers, and Canada's $100 billion bullet train is no different. On paper, everyone wins. Cleaner travel, faster trips, economic growth. But peel back the glossy renderings and the reality gets much harsher. Let's start with the winners. If you're a business traveller shuttling between Toronto, Ottawa and Montreal, the high-speed rail is a dream come true. 3 hours from Union Station to downtown Montreal. Suddenly, meetings that once devoured a whole day can be squeezed into a morning. Corporations that operate across the corridor stand to save millions in lost time. For them, this is efficiency at its sharpest. Real estate developers are circling too. High-speed rail stations have a way of transforming neighbourhoods overnight. What's farmland today could become tomorrow's boomtown. Condos, shopping centres, hotels all spring up around new transport hubs. Cities along the route, like Kingston, could suddenly find themselves connected to two global hubs in ways they never imagined. Then there's the climate angle. Airlines know they're about to lose big. High-speed rail kills short-haul flights wherever it arrives. In France, domestic flights under 2.5 hours were scrapped once the TGV took over. If Canada pulls this off, flights between Toronto, Ottawa and Montreal could vanish, replaced by bullet trains slicing emissions by millions of tonnes. That's a win for the planet, but a loss for airlines already fighting thin margins. Now the losers. Drivers who rely on the 401 might cheer at less traffic, but taxpayers may not be so thrilled when they see the bill. Even if private partners step in, the public will inevitably foot part of the cost. That means higher taxes, diverted funds, and less cash for healthcare, housing, or education. Politicians will sell this as investment. Critics will call it the most expensive train ride in Canadian history. Then there are the communities caught in the crossfire. Building high-speed rail requires land expropriation, farms split in half, homes bulldozed, entire landscapes reshaped for the sake of straight, flat track. For families in the way, this isn't nation building, it's personal devastation. Airlines and airports, they stand to be gutted. Pearson, Trudeau, even Ottawa International rely on short-haul traffic to keep revenues flowing. If the train eats that market, airports will scramble to fill the gap with international flights or risk massive financial holes. And don't forget VIA Rail. Canada's national passenger rail service already struggles with delays, aging trains and chronically underfunded routes. High-speed rail could either save it or sideline it completely. If private operators run the line, VIA could become irrelevant overnight, reduced to a second-class service in its own country. The truth is, this project isn't just about train, it's about power. Who controls the corridor, who profits from it, and who gets left behind in the dust? Because for every winner celebrating their new 3-hour commute, there will be losers staring at empty airports, demolished homes, and broken promises. The only question is, when the dust settles, which side will Canada find itself on? High-speed rail sounds like progress, but here's the uncomfortable question. Can the numbers actually make sense? Or is this just a shiny $100 billion dream with no financial backbone? Let's start with the basics. At $100 billion, this would be the single most expensive infrastructure project in Canadian history. Bigger than pipelines, bigger than hydro dams, even bigger than the Trans-Canada Highway. For context, that's roughly $2,500 for every Canadian citizen just to build the line. And that's before interest, overrun, or operations. How do governments justify that? They point to ridership. The Toronto-Ottawa-Montreal corridor is home to over 20 million people. In theory, if even a fraction trade planes and cars for train, revenues could be massive. Supporters argue fares would undercut short-haul flights, making the train not just faster, but cheaper. Add in the billions saved on lost productivity from clogged highways and airports, and suddenly the economics don't look so crazy. But critics see a different picture. VIA Rail's passenger numbers hover around 5 million annually, a fraction of Japan or France. To justify $100 billion, the bullet train would need to attract tens of millions of riders a year. And not just once, it would need sustained demand for decades. That's a gamble on future population growth, changing travel habits, and a Canadian public willing to abandon its obsession with cars. Then there's maintenance. High-speed rail systems are money-hungry beasts. Tracks must be obsessively maintained, snow cleared instantly, rolling stock replaced every few decades. France, Spain, and Japan can absorb these costs because their networks are vast, spreading expenses across thousands of kilometres of track. Canada would be starting with a single line. That means every dollar of upkeep is magnified. The financing structure only makes it messier. Will this be funded by taxpayers, public-private partnerships, foreign investors? Each option carries risks. If private companies invest, they'll demand profit, driving up ticket prices. If it's taxpayer-funded, politicians will face fury when healthcare or housing budgets feel the squeeze. And if foreign firms are involved, questions of sovereignty and control will fuel heated debates. Then comes the nightmare scenario, cost overrun. California's bullet train started at $33 billion. Today, it's north of $100 billion with no end in sight. Britain's HS2 project ballooned so badly that entire sections have been cancelled mid-construction. What happens if Canada's line hits $150 or even $200 billion? Could Ottawa stomach the cost, or would the project be axed halfway through, leaving behind a half-finished monument to failure? Supporters counter with a bold argument. High-speed rail isn't a cost, it's an investment. Just as the Canadian Pacific Railway united the nation in the 19th century, this project could unite it in the 21st. They point to economic multipliers, jobs created, cities revitalised, emissions slashed, housing markets unlocked. If done right, the train could pay for itself many times over. But the gamble remains. Can Canada really transform $100 billion of taxpayer and investor money into a sustainable, profitable, world-class rail system? Or are we watching history, another mega project too big to fail, until it does? The answer might not lie in economics at all, but in something far more dangerous, political will. If Canada builds this line, it won't just be another infrastructure project. It will be a message to the world, because make no mistake, Canada's reputation is on the line. For decades, Canada has been seen as cautious, pragmatic, even timid when it comes to bold infrastructure. While Japan launched the Shinkansen in the 1960s, France rolled out the TGV in the 80s, and China now boasts the largest high-speed rail network on Earth, Canada has stayed stuck in slow motion. Our fast trains barely crack highway speed limit. The bullet train is supposed to change that. If the Toronto-Montreal line succeeds, it would mark Canada's arrival as a serious player in the global race for modern transit. Imagine the headlines: Canada finally joins the high-speed club. For a nation often overshadowed by its southern neighbour, this is more than engineering. It's identity, a rare chance to prove we can dream big, build big, and actually deliver. But here's the flip side. Failure wouldn't just embarrass Canada at home, it would humiliate it abroad. Picture it, a half-built rail corridor, billions wasted, taxpayers furious, and the world shaking its head at yet another Canadian megaproject gone wrong. California's bullet train became a global punchline. If Canada follows the same path, the ridicule would be merciless. Beyond reputation, the stakes stretch into geopolitics. The Toronto-Montreal corridor isn't just a domestic route, it's a gateway to North America. Imagine if the system expanded westward to Windsor and eastward to Quebec City, maybe even connecting across the border into the US. That would reshape continental trade, tourism, and politics. High-speed rail could become a powerful tool for economic integration, or a missed opportunity that leaves Canada trailing behind while the US and Mexico race ahead. Then there's the climate stage. At a time when global leaders are under pressure to slash emissions, Canada's bullet train could become a flagship example of green infrastructure. Every short-haul flight eliminated is a victory for climate pledges. If successful, Canada could hold up the project at international summits as proof it's doing more than talking, it's acting. But if it failed, it risks being seen as a country that overpromises and underdelivers. And the ripple effects don't stop there. Canada could unleash a wave of new high-speed projects across the country. Toronto to Windsor, Calgary to Edmonton, even Vancouver to Seattle. Success would light a fuse. Failure would snuff it out for generations. The global spotlight is already fixed on this project. Investors are watching, foreign governments are watching, and Canadians themselves are watching, asking one question: can this country finally build something world-class, or will it crumble under its own ambition? Because in the end, this isn't just about Toronto and Montreal. It's about whether Canada has the courage to step onto the world stage, or retreat once again into safe mediocrity. So what is Canada really building here? A once-in-a-century leap forward, or a $100 billion train wreck waiting to happen? On one side, the dreamers argue this is destiny. They see a nation finally ready to match its global peers, to invest in infrastructure that will outlast generations. A system that will slash emissions, shrink travel time, spark economic growth, and redefine Canadian identity. For them, this is Canada's moon landing moment, something bold, impossible looking, and absolutely worth the risk. On the other side, the skeptics see disaster written all over it. They point to California's fiasco, to Britain's HS2 debacle, to Canada's own endless LRT delays. They see a country with no experience in high-speed rail, no domestic manufacturing base, and no political appetite for cost overrun. To them, this isn't nation building, it's nation bleeding, a project destined to balloon in cost, stall in construction, and leave behind nothing but debt and disappointment. The truth? Both sides may be right. It's the kind of project that could transform everything or collapse under its own ambition. The stakes aren't just financial, they're cultural, political, and even psychological. Success would prove that Canada can still dream big and deliver. Failure would confirm every cynical joke about Canadian infrastructure, that we can't build fast, can't build on time, and can't build without breaking the bank. What if Canada can't afford not to build it? What if the real disaster isn't the risk of overspending, but the risk of doing nothing, of letting the 401 choke in gridlock, letting airports crumble under demand, letting an entire generation of Canadians grow up believing their country simply isn't capable of world-class ambition? That's the paradox of this project. Build it and you risk losing billions. Don't build it and you risk losing something far greater, belief. Belief that Canada can compete, innovate, and rise to the challenges of the 21st century. So is this high-speed rail a dream or a disaster? The truth is, it could be both. And maybe that's what makes it so compelling. Because sometimes the riskiest bets are the only ones worth making. Here's the thing about high-speed rail. It's never just about train. It's about what kind of country you want to be. Do you play it safe or do you gamble big on the future? Canada has spent decades circling this dream, never daring to pull the trigger. Now, with a $100 billion proposal on the table, the nation faces a choice that could define it for generations. Build it, and Canada joins the ranks of countries that dared to reimagine how people move, how economies connect, how entire societies function. Fail, and Canada becomes another cautionary tale, another California, burning billions with nothing to show for it but half-finished tracks rusting in the snow. The stakes are enormous. Entire industries stand to rise or fall. Airlines could vanish from the short-haul market. Developers could create new cities from scratch around sleek glass stations. Farmers could lose land that's been in their families for generations. Government could cement legacies or destroy careers. And all of it hangs on a single gamble. Can Canada do what it has never done before? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Once the first shovel hits the ground, there's no going back. Billions will be sunk, politics will be poisoned, and every Canadian will have skin in the game whether they like it or not. That's the danger of dreaming big. It binds you to the outcome. So what will it be? A bullet train slicing across Ontario and Quebec at 300 kilometres per hour, a symbol of Canadian ambition finally realised. Or another megaproject buried under red tape, cost overruns, and broken promises? No one knows. Not the politicians selling the dream, not the engineers drawing the maps, not even the corporations waiting to cash in. The only thing we know for sure is this: the clock is ticking, the stakes couldn't be higher, and the world is watching. And when that first train finally leaves the station, if it ever does, it won't just be passengers on board. It'll be Canada's reputation, its future, and its ability to prove that sometimes the biggest risks are the only way forward.